Jake Walker was a 35-year-old father of two, a guy who always tried to go above and beyond when it came to making his kids' birthdays unforgettable. With a knack for thinking outside the box, Jake had the kind of enthusiasm that could turn even the most ordinary idea into something special. When his daughter Emily's 9th birthday was approaching, Jake felt an extra push to make it stand out. Emily, with her wide-eyed excitement and energy that could light up a room, had been asking for something unique. The usual birthday party formula, cake, presents, and games, had gotten a little too predictable. Jake had the idea of doing something completely different. What if he could bring the food to them? Not just any food, but a real, professional food truck? A taco truck, to be specific. The thought of a taco truck parked right in their driveway, serving fresh, sizzling tacos and quesadillas to Emily and her friends, filled Jake with an unusual sense of excitement. He figured it would be something out of the ordinary, a cool experience that would make the day feel like a mini fiesta. He could already picture the kids' faces lighting up as they dug into their tacos, and the adults mingling by the truck, enjoying the casual, festival-like atmosphere. Rachel, Jake's wife, wasn't entirely sold on the idea at first. "Isn't it a bit much?" she asked, glancing at Jake as he enthusiastically mapped out the details. "I mean, do we really need a food truck in our driveway? Won't the neighbors think it's strange?" But Emily had been dreaming of a food truck birthday party for months, and Jake wasn't about to disappoint her. "It'll be fun," he insisted. "Trust me, it'll be memorable." With Rachel's hesitant blessing, Jake dove headfirst into planning. He booked Taco Mania, a well-reviewed taco truck that was known for its mouth-watering street tacos and perfect churros. He also made sure to clear the driveway, which meant temporarily moving the family's car and the kids' bikes. He set up a small seating area with a couple of picnic tables, strung up colorful balloons, and got a portable speaker to play a mix of fun music. There would be games for the kids. Things like a piñata, sack races, and a water balloon toss. The morning of the party, Emily was practically bouncing off the walls. She'd been talking about her birthday for weeks, but now that the day had arrived, she could hardly contain her excitement. She couldn't believe that the taco truck was actually coming to their house. Rachel was busy inside making sure everything else was in place. The decorations, the drinks, and the inevitable mountain of presents. Jake checked the time. The taco truck was supposed to arrive at 2 p.m. sharp, and at 1:55, he saw the familiar truck turning down the street. His heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment that would make Emily's birthday unforgettable. The truck pulled into the driveway, and Jake greeted the driver, exchanging pleasantries as the truck parked right where Jake had cleared space. At first, everything went off without a hitch. The kids lined up, eager to fill their hands with tacos, while the adults lingered nearby, chatting and munching on their own food. Jake stood back for a moment, watching the scene unfold with satisfaction. The kids were laughing, running around, and eating like they'd never had food before. It felt exactly like he'd hoped, joyful and relaxed, with a touch of festive energy. Rachel smiled at him, and for a fleeting moment, Jake felt like the hero of the day. Then, just as things were settling into the perfect rhythm, he noticed a figure in his peripheral vision. It was Barbara Norris, the woman who lived 2 doors down, the self-proclaimed queen of neighborhood rules, and the one everyone dreaded crossing paths with. Barbara, who was notoriously particular about everything, was walking briskly toward Jake, her eyes narrowed, scanning the scene like an overzealous sheriff patrolling a dusty frontier town. Jake had always known Barbara to be a bit uptight, but he hadn't expected her to be so confrontational. He waved at her, thinking she was just curious about the taco truck, maybe just another neighbor eager to try it out. But when she approached, there was no hello or even a polite greeting. Instead, she fixed him with a stern look. "Jake," she said, her voice clipped and serious, "what do you think you're doing?" Hey, Barbara. Just having a little birthday celebration for Emily, you know. The taco truck is here for the kids. Pretty fun, huh?" Barbara didn't seem impressed. Her gaze moved over the truck, the picnic tables, and the line of kids eating tacos, as if she were inspecting a crime scene. "This is completely inappropriate," she said, her tone sharp. "You can't just have a food truck here. This is a residential neighborhood, not some food festival." Jake blinked confused. "Wait, what? It's just a birthday party. We're not running a business or anything. It's for Emily and her friends." Barbara's eyes narrowed further. "I don't care what it's for. The HOA has rules. You can't have commercial activity in your driveway. I'm calling the police if you don't shut this down immediately." Jake laughed nervously. "No offense, Barbara, but this is just a taco truck for a birthday. It's not a big deal." Barbara didn't find it funny. "This isn't just a big deal. It's illegal," she shot back. "I've seen the bylaws. This is a violation, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Jake stood there for a moment, speechless. Was she really serious? He thought back to the HOA rules, but nothing seemed to apply to a one-time event like this. Still, Barbara wasn't someone who would back down easily. She was one of those people who always had a rule or a regulation for every situation. As Jake tried to figure out how to respond, Barbara turned sharply on her heel and walked back to her house without another word, presumably to make the dreaded phone call. He stood frozen, a knot in his stomach tightening. What had just happened? How had something as simple as a taco truck for his daughter's birthday turned into this? Jake tried to shake off the tension, but the unease lingered. This was supposed to be a fun day for Emily, not a fight with a neighbor. About 30 minutes after Barbara left, Jake began to feel like maybe the situation wasn't as bad as it had seemed. He told himself that Barbara was probably overreacting, and that once the food truck left, things would settle back into normal. The party was still in full swing, and the kids were happy. Emily had her friends gathered around the truck, faces smeared with taco sauce, giggling as they tried to see who could eat the most churros without getting a stomachache. The adults were chatting, sipping cold drinks, and enjoying the simple joy of a relaxed Saturday afternoon. But then Jake saw Barbara again, only this time she wasn't walking alone. She had company, and not just any company. A pair of local police officers were following her up the driveway. Jake's stomach dropped like a stone. Barbara had returned, not just to complain, but to bring the full force of the law down on him. The officers, Officer Thompson and Officer Peters, looked somewhat bewildered as they took in the scene. The taco truck was parked. The kids were laughing and eating, and the party atmosphere was far from chaotic. It was downright festive. Jake felt a lump in his throat. This wasn't happening. Not on his daughter's birthday. Barbara, on the other hand, was in full-on Karen mode, marching up to the officers like she was a mayor of the neighborhood, her eyes locked on Jake. She didn't waste a second. "This man is operating a food truck in violation of HOA regulations," she declared, pointing a finger at Jake like he was some kind of criminal. "This is illegal. It's a commercial business operating in a residential area. He needs to be shut down immediately, or I want him arrested." Jake's brain scrambled to make sense of the situation. The police officers exchanged a quick glance before looking at him, clearly trying to figure out what was going on. Officer Thompson, a tall, calm-looking man, stepped forward. "Sir, what's the situation here?" he asked, his tone professional, but not unfriendly. Jake took a deep breath, trying not to let his frustration show. "It's a birthday party. I hired the taco truck for my daughter's birthday. It's a one-time event, not a business. We're not selling anything or trying to make a profit." Barbara cut in, her voice rising in pitch. "I've been part of this neighborhood for 20 years, and I know the rules. You can't just have a business in your driveway, especially one that serves food. I've already checked with the HOA, and this is a violation. The truck has no business being here." Jake tried to explain again, more patiently this time. "Look, I get that there are rules, but this isn't a business. The truck is just here for a few hours as part of a personal celebration. It's not permanent or commercial. It's just food for the kids and their parents." Barbara was having none of it. She was practically shaking with indignation. "It doesn't matter. It's a violation of the HOA's guidelines." There's no commercial activity allowed in this neighborhood. You're breaking the law." The officers glanced at each other again. Officer Peters, a younger woman who seemed to be taking in the situation more quietly, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we understand your concern, but we need to look at this carefully. If it's a private event with no business dealings or transactions happening, there may not be an issue." Barbara was relentless. "I don't care what they say. This is a disruption. It's not allowed." Jake felt his face flush with frustration. "This is for my daughter. It's not a business. We just wanted to do something different. It's a private event, not a commercial operation." But Barbara wasn't listening anymore. She was fixated on getting the officers to do something, anything, to shut the party down. The officers, for their part, seemed a little lost. It was clear they weren't exactly thrilled to be dragged into a neighborhood squabble over tacos. Finally, Officer Thompson sighed and looked at Barbara. "Ma'am, we'll need to check the local regulations on food trucks before we can make any decisions. We don't typically handle HOA rules. This is a matter for the HOA itself." Barbara huffed, but she didn't back down. "I don't care what you do, but you need to make him shut it down. It's illegal." Officer Peters, her patience growing thin, stepped up. "Ma'am, we're going to have to look into this. There's no need to escalate this situation further right now. We'll look into the rules, but unless we see something illegal happening, we can't force them to stop." Barbara, though, wasn't finished. "I will not let this slide," she muttered, almost to herself, before turning and marching back toward her house. Jake stood there, his chest tight with anxiety, as the officers talked briefly among themselves. The kids were still oblivious to the drama unfolding just a few feet away from them. They continued to laugh, playing their games and eating their tacos, while Jake tried to collect his thoughts. Rachel, who had been standing nearby, walked over to him. "What's going on?" she whispered, her face showing concern. "Barbara's calling the cops," Jake said quietly, trying to keep his voice steady. "She says the food truck's illegal or something, that it's violating HOA rules. The officers are checking it out." Rachel's eyes widened. "Are you kidding? Over a taco truck?" Jake shook his head. "Apparently not." A few tense minutes later, the officers walked back over to Jake. Officer Thompson spoke first. "All right, here's the situation," he said. "We've looked into the matter. While we can't speak to HOA rules, we did confirm that, as long as this is a private, one-time event and no commercial transaction is happening, there's no issue with the food truck being here. But if there are complaints, it's up to the HOA to enforce their own rules." Jake let out a sigh of relief. "So, you're not going to shut us down?" "No," Officer Thompson said with a small shake of his head. "You're fine to continue, but if this escalates further, you'll need to handle it through the HOA, not the police." The officers started to turn away, but before they could leave, Barbara appeared again, her arms crossed in front of her like she was ready for a fight. "I don't accept this," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is just the beginning. I'll make sure this gets reported. You'll be hearing from the HOA." Jake couldn't believe it. She wasn't done. Despite the officers clearing the situation, Barbara was determined to make things as difficult as possible. She stormed off toward her house, muttering about how the neighborhood needed to be preserved and that this kind of behavior wouldn't stand. As Jake watched her retreating figure, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about tacos anymore. Barbara wasn't going to let it go, no matter what the officers said. It was clear she was on a mission to make an example out of him, and the worst part was that he knew this wasn't going to be the last he heard from her. The party had started as a celebration, a way to make Emily's birthday special. But now, it felt like everything was on the verge of falling apart, all because of one neighbor's determination to make his life difficult. As the kids continued to enjoy their food, Jake couldn't help but wonder how much worse this could get. The worst was yet to come. The next few days were a blur for Jake. Despite the police officers clearing the situation, Barbara's wrath didn't subside. Within 24 hours of the birthday party, Jake found an email from the HOA in his inbox, and his stomach dropped when he read the subject line. Notice of violation, non-compliance with HOA guidelines. He clicked open the message, and sure enough, it was a formal notice that accused him of violating the HOA's rules regarding commercial activities in a residential area. The message listed fines for operating a food truck in his driveway without prior authorization. The letter wasn't just a warning. It was a demand for payment of fines, along with a stipulation that Jake attend a formal hearing if he wished to contest the charges. Jake couldn't believe it. Despite the fact that it had been a one-time birthday celebration and not a business operation, the HOA was taking Barbara's complaint seriously. The notice didn't even mention that the police had been involved or that they had deemed the situation harmless. It felt like the HOA was siding with Barbara from the start. Rachel was equally stunned. This is insane. How can they fine us for having a taco truck at a birthday party? Jake rubbed his temples. I don't know. I guess Barbara went full Karen on them. Rachel stared at the letter. This is ridiculous. But it's not over. We can fight this. We have to. It seemed like the fight had just begun, but Jake had no idea what he was about to face. A week later, the official HOA meeting was scheduled, and Jake felt the weight of it hanging over him. The hearing would take place in the neighborhood's community center, a small building that was often used for HOA gatherings and other neighborhood events. He could already picture Barbara sitting at the front of the room, her arms crossed and a smug look on her face. She would probably try to spin the whole taco truck situation into a scandal, making it sound like Jake was some kind of criminal for daring to make his daughter's birthday special. Rachel encouraged Jake to take Dave Mitchell, the lawyer who had spoken to the police officers at the party, with him to the hearing. Dave had lived in the neighborhood for years and knew the ins and outs of HOA regulations better than anyone. He also had a reputation for being a bit of a bulldog when it came to fighting bureaucratic nonsense. If anyone can get us out of this mess, it's Dave, Rachel insisted. The morning of the meeting, Jake tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting back to the upcoming confrontation. By noon, Dave had arrived at their house, briefcase in hand, ready to tackle the HOA head-on. As they headed over to the community center, Jake couldn't shake the nervous feeling gnawing at his stomach. He wasn't just fighting a fine anymore. He was fighting for his right to enjoy his own property without being micromanaged by a neighbor who seemed determined to make his life miserable. When they arrived at the community center, Jake was shocked to see that the small parking lot was packed with cars. It wasn't just the usual HOA board members in attendance. There was a whole crowd of neighbors who had shown up, some of them holding signs that read things like "Support our community" and "No to HOA overreach." As they walked in, Jake saw familiar faces. People who had been at the party and had enjoyed the taco truck. I didn't know people were this invested in this, Jake muttered, his surprise evident. Dave chuckled. Seems like it's bigger than just you now. They found seats near the back of the room, and Jake couldn't help but notice the intense atmosphere. There was a buzz in the air, a sense of anticipation. Barbara, of course, was seated front and center, wearing her usual expression of superiority. The HOA president, Gerald Harris, a middle-aged man with a too-tight suit and a tendency to ramble, stood at the podium, preparing to open the meeting. As the meeting started, it quickly became clear that this wasn't going to be a simple hearing. Gerald began by reading through the official charges against Jake, outlining the supposed violations in a way that made the taco truck sound like a dangerous, illegal operation. Jake bit his tongue, trying to keep his composure as Barbara gave him an almost triumphant smile from the front. But then something unexpected happened. Dave Mitchell stood up, interrupting the proceedings. With all the authority of a seasoned lawyer, he addressed the room. "Excuse me, Gerald. Before we get too deep into this, I'd like to present some facts." The room quieted as Dave began speaking. First, there is no law against a food truck appearing at a private event. No zoning law prohibits food trucks at residential properties for private parties, and no transaction took place. This was a birthday party, not a business operation. What Barbara is calling a violation is In fact, a perfectly legal, private event. Dave turned to the board. Moreover, the HOA's governing documents do not have any specific clause banning such events. The rules around commercial activity apply to ongoing, business-related operations, not one-time events like this. Jake could hardly believe his ears. For the first time, it felt like someone was actually speaking the truth about what had happened, rather than feeding into Barbara's paranoid narrative. Barbara stood up, visibly flustered, and tried to counter. That's not the point. It's disruptive. It's against the spirit of the neighborhood. If we allow this, it'll set a precedent. Next, we'll have food trucks every weekend. But before she could continue, Dave was ready. If you're concerned about future food trucks, Barbara, that's something you can bring up at a separate HOA meeting. But today, we're discussing the violation you've accused Jake of. And it's clear that there was no violation. The room was tense. Jake could see the board members starting to look uncomfortable. They were listening, and they didn't seem entirely convinced by Barbara's arguments. There was a growing sense that maybe they had been too quick to side with her, without fully considering the facts. After a few more rounds of back and forth, Gerald Harris, the HOA president, finally spoke up. All right, after hearing the arguments, we're going to take a vote. Jake's heart was in his throat as the board members cast their votes. The tension in the room was palpable. When the vote was finally tallied, it was unanimous. The charges against Jake were dropped. There would be no fine. The HOA agreed that the taco truck incident was a one-time, private event and that no laws had been broken. As the meeting adjourned, Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. The nightmare was over. He had won, and not just for himself, but for the entire neighborhood. It turned out that the HOA wasn't as invincible as Barbara had hoped. Walking out of the community center, Jake was surprised by the group of neighbors who gathered around to congratulate him. It was a strange feeling to see so many people rallying behind him, especially when just a week ago, it felt like the entire neighborhood was turning against him. Glad it worked out, Jake, Clara, the grandmother from down the street, said with a wink. It's good to see someone stand up to Barbara. Jake smiled. Thanks. I guess we all learn a little something about not letting someone push us around